So Rob has been in Antelope Valley, now that we have a little introduction by Rob himself. I'm here with his lovely wife, Wendy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having
Didn't have to come and do this, but we really appreciate it.
We get to.
You get to come and do it. He's been a licensed real estate professional since 2006, experienced REO broker, managed and sold numerous properties for Bank of America, Wells Fargo, other lending firms, serviced as a relocation specialist for Lockheed Martin, Edwards Air Force Base, Northrop Grumman, and other military subcontracting firms. Currently, Rob is the operating principal with Keller Williams VIP Properties in Valencia and with Keller Williams Central in Northridge. Rob has built his real estate team to be completely leveraged using the MREA business models. We all know where we find those, right? In 2012, he became team leader of Keller Williams Antelope Valley, where he stayed until 2018. He grew that office to be the #1 in market share. They consistently share profits with their associates. Also, Rob is a leadership coach with KW Maps Coaching.
Maps Coaching.
And obviously, he travels to train, consult, and coach associates, leadership, and other professionals on personal development and real estate related topics.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
Yeah, wow.
And that is why we live in Hawaii.
So I wore,
To
oh, how nice is
welcome
that?
you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you.
You guys are so hospitable. This is why we come. We don't need money.
That's what we do.
We're just like favors.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Okay. Well, that was a very nice intro. And since we have a little private lesson room.
I know, I love it.
I like small groups.
Yeah, me too.
I like small groups because here's what's cool about that is that it is guaranteed that I'm going to get the most out of the day because I'm the one facilitating and teaching, right? The person that prepared the most and facilitates usually learns the most. And as much as I love big crowds, when we have small crowds, it becomes like a mastermind. It becomes a little private lesson. And so we could have 50 people in here and kind of water ski over all these topics because it's different talking with 25 to 50 people or even 300, whatever it looks like. When you have a group this small, we can literally answer each one of your questions and like dive into how you guys come away with something that could be a seed that transforms your business and ultimately transforms your life. So I'm very interactive. Like I said, if there was 50 people in the room, I would totally take questions and pause and really kind of scuba dive into some of this stuff. But I'm going to give you guys some context with this course. This started off being a family reunion breakout session. In 2015, we as MAPS coaches, we had a breakout session called the 10 Habits of Highly Effective Agents or Highly Successful Agents. It was kind of a spin-off, a play on words. At the time, a lot of Keller Williams leadership, including John Davis, who is the driver of the growth initiative, were using Stephen Covey's business models, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, the 4 Disciplines of Execution. Are you guys familiar with these? Okay, if you haven't read Stephen Covey's stuff, write it down as a prerequisite to life. I mean, Stephen Covey's stuff is great. So the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is a book that Stephen Covey wrote, and if you know the 4 Disciplines of Execution, then you're very familiar with the growth initiative model. We have the 4 disciplines, there's 4 boxes. There's no coincidence that we have a scoreboard, and that philosophy comes from the Stephen Covey philosophy of having a scoreboard, if you guys have read that book. So this was a 2015 family reunion breakout. How many of you guys know what family reunion is? For 100 Realtor Jeopardy points, right? Okay. So family reunion, in my opinion, is the most fun event that Keller Williams puts on. It's also the best representation of like what Keller Williams is all about. If you had a friend or if you really wanted to experience what the intention of Keller Williams culture was all about, like being here on the islands, you're like, I think we do it pretty good, but I'd really like to make sure that we're in alignment with like what the intention is, go to family reunion. It's a commercial for 4.5 days of just Keller Williams agents having fun, celebrating each other, doing breakouts, stage speakers, best practices, Gary Keller giving a vision speech. It's not my favorite event, but it is probably the most fun. It's probably the best representation of what we do, right? Some of my favorite events are some of the more smaller ones where we're getting in, like really diving deep in some of the skills, like Coach's Skills Camp is a lot of fun, stuff like that. But I geek out on metrics and numbers and ways of doing things. So yeah, so originally this was a family reunion breakout, And it was taught as a breakout, and then it became a course that facilitators could go on and then teach in market centers. The reason why I like this course is because it hits on a lot of the topics that allow me to pattern interrupt you guys, right? We're gonna be talking about some things that you have already heard, but I like to talk about them in ways that you haven't heard them. It makes us learn a little bit differently, right? If you guys know how the brain works, there's these little cells in your brain, and they're creating memories. You might have a cell that's associated with a certain memory or a certain word, or like we were just playing the game with the names, right? How can we make different associations, different pathways to connect us to that cell? And the more like wires we put to those cells that fire together and kind of line up, the more access we're going to have and the quicker access we're going to have. Kind of like an internet connection, right? We got Wi-Fi and we got the Cat5 or whatever it is. So we do the same thing with memories. So I'm big on words. You'll hear as we go on for the day. I'm a big neuro-linguistics guy. I think words have meaning, right? You say one word, and we're here on the islands. Is it not true that like one word in Hawaiian, it's like it could like tell a whole story with just one word, right? I mean, there's certain words that mean certain things, and so much so that even though there's a word that means something here, in a different context, it means a whole different story, right? And I think that's fascinating. How can one word like have a whole story behind it? And in fact, if you've ever gone into the dictionary and you like look up a word, and we're going to do that a couple times today, we're going to look up words and like, what does that really mean? And you're going to see that they're going to give us like a whole bunch of other words to tell us what one word means. And I know it's kind of deep and philosophical, but I'm fascinated by that because to me, words create stories. And so the way that we connect those is like, I say a word, and what that does is it makes your brain fire and it makes you think of something. So I lovingly tell my wife all the time, like I will say something, I'll ask her a question, and I'm a very high driver personality. I have a high I with an asterisk as well, but I'm also very bottom line low patience, right? And unfortunately the people that I love the most probably experience my lack of patience the most. Right? And so my wife, in her beautiful and sweet and calm ways, I will ask her a question, and that question will make her think of something. And instead of answering my question, she'll start talking about the thing it made her think about, right? And I'll be like, that's not what I asked. But it made her think, right? I said something, and it created a story in her mind. Her brain went somewhere, and so she started talking about that thing. Well, in life and in business, all those same things happens with words. So the word that we're going to really dive into today, what do you think of? What do they call that like in English when you like have a little paragraph or a sentence and they're like highlight? Is it like the root word or the key word? Like what is the topic of this sentence kind of thing? What's that word called? You homeschool our kids, right? So we have this sentence, and what I would ask is like we're looking at the 10 habits of highly successful agents. A place for everything in its place. Free your mind and learn how to organize your life and business to increase productivity and profitability. What stands out about that?
Habits.
Habits, yeah. So what's a habit?
It's an ingrained ritual
Yeah.
that those pathways you've just created, they're just, you've taken.
It's just
you've
wired
cleaned-
that way. It's
you've cleaned the
automatic.
highway.
Yeah. It's just there. We don't even think about it, right? We don't even think about it. And so a place for everything in its place. And what stood out to me is I put this up, I was like, free your mind. Free your mind. That kind of stands out. And I tell my wife, my brain is very active. Like, I struggle going to sleep. I struggle because my brain's always on, right? And I'm a left brain dominant person, which if you guys know left brain, right brain, it's the creative wavy side of your brain. So because of that, I can walk into a room in real estate and I have a very creative mind. I have good spatial visualization. If this was an open box, I could see how the office should look. Oh, we'll put a wall here. We'll put, we'll do all this stuff. If we moved it out, the conduit comes down. I can see things like that because my mind defaults to the creative side. And if you know like music is left side. Like the music part of music, a song, is on the left side of the brain, but the lyrics on the right side. So the right side's like this analytical side of your brain that sees the words and structures and things like that, right? So what I tell my wife is like, I love being in the audience at conventions or learning events because the act of learning distracts my left side of the brain. And what happens is I get very efficient in my ideas and my words, I take great notes. I write down all kinds of, because clarity starts coming out because my mind is free, like this drunk monkey that's living in my head, just like banging on cymbals and talking to me all the time is kind of mesmerized with what's going on. Or when we were on the plane, I was kind of reviewing some of my topics and I had my PowerPoint and I put on my headphones and just turned on classical music. And what it did is it just busied that side of my brain, and it was like things were just flowing out, right? Because I could now see the words because the creative side of my brain was distracted for a little bit. So I like that part, freeing your mind to learn, freeing your mind to learn how to organize life and business. And so as we get into this, I'm gonna be kind of making some tie downs, right? I'm gonna be bringing you back to things and be like, what's your aha around that? And like I said, my intention for the day is that you guys would have something planted inside you. You would have a seed that would create everlasting transformation. If this day, if just one thing was said for you and each one of you guys in the room, each one of you took something away that then blossomed from today and forever transformed your life in a progressive way because of something that we had just one conversation with, like this seed that made you think differently, that's my intention for the day. So if you guys feel that being planted, like, that's the difference between, let's say, like motivation and inspiration, by the way, right? Motivation is motivating someone. It's like, like, you ever heard the expression, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force him to drink? You're like, oh yes you can. You can ride that horse till he's tired and he'll drink, or you can shove his head underwater. That's called motivation, right? I'm gonna motivate you. It's a little bit of stick, right? That's motivation. Or, my wife in the morning, I get to wake up to her motivating our children to get up and get ready for school. Like, come on, let's do it, up and at 'em, right? That's motivation. Inspiration is something that's planted within you, and once it's there, you're inspired. Like, it now lives within you. And, I was up at 4:30 in the morning today. I'm not an early riser. I don't like it. And yesterday I was up at 5:30 in the morning because I had some coaching calls with people on the East Coast. I coached the number 3 market center in the nation, the OP of that market center, and she lives in Maine. And so they're 6 hours ahead of us right now. We have a 9 a.m. coaching call. I'm like, okay, well, I'll be up at 5. And she's like, you should have postponed me. I'm like, no way. Like, I woke up and I'm excited to get on that call. I don't like mornings, and usually I'm the last one to get up on the weekends and things like that. I like my sleep. And today I was excited, and we were joking in the elevator. I'm like, who does that 4:30 morning? She's like, I know, I'm so proud of you. I said, I'm really excited. Like, I love doing this stuff. It does wake me up. It's because I'm inspired to teach. I don't know any of you personally yet. I'm hoping by the end of the day we'll know each other better. But by the, just walking into this, knowing that if there was one person in the room, I could plant a seed of inspiration, like, that excites me. That's what feeds me. So that's my intention. And as we're going through the day, I'm going to make distinctions. And these distinctions are going to be with these ahas. And I want them to be deep because I want them to land with you. I want them to kind of disrupt this like inspiration that's there. And ultimately, we want to think and we want to feel something that's going to get us to act in a different way, right? And that's what coaching is all about. Coaching, a great coach gets you to think differently so that you can have what you want when you want. Thinking differently is the key to creating the everlasting change. It's all starting with the way we think. So yeah, to me, I looked at this and I was like, wow, freeing your mind is what stood out to me. Because when my mind is free, I'm free to then work in that analytical world where I'm at my best, right? I actually function very well in that world, but this drunk monkey called Creative Raw is just always just banging drums and talking about things, 100 ideas a minute and all that, and I gotta free him up a little bit. So productivity and profitability as well. So organize your life and your business, productivity and profitability. What's significant about those words, productivity and profitability?
You can't have one without the other.
Well,
No, sometimes.
yeah,
For a little while.
Yeah. And maybe I would say I'm with you. I see where you're going with that. What does it mean to be productive, though? Like, what is productivity? Like, why productivity? What's significant about that word?
Create and produce results that lead to your profitability.
Yeah.
Action.
Well, so Diana Kokoska taught me there's 2 areas of our life that, as just as human beings, right? And we're going to discover a lot of truths. Let's rephrase that. We're going to tap into a lot of truths. And in this world, there's these things called laws, and they're just real, like gravity, right? I can just refuse to accept. I can get up on one of these cliffs here and I can say, I refuse to accept the laws of gravity. And yet, am I the determiner? Do I get to decide how gravity works? Like, I'm not that authority. You know, like, it just works without me. So I can either accept its truth or I can succumb to that, right? This highway patrolman, you know, we're driving down the road. If I'm going a little too fast, knock on wood. If I get pulled over and I say, I'm sorry, I was doing 100 miles an hour down, you know, Halloweeny Highway, and I was doing 100 miles an hour, I do not accept your truth. Like, your authority, I don't recognize it. I live my own life. It doesn't matter whether you accept it or not. You don't need to even acknowledge it. You are going to submit to it because you're not the authority around that. So in life, there's all these laws out there. There's all these truths out there. And whether we acknowledge them or not, they are real. That's what truth is. However, we're a lot more empowered. We're a lot more productive and profitable in life when we just acknowledge these truths that exist. We accept them for what they are, and we embrace them and use them as tools, right? I mean, is our life not a little better when we just acknowledge that there's rules around our society, and when we adhere to those rules, life gets a little easier, right? I'm going to talk a little bit about this later, but I'm writing a book. And in my book, I came up with a title recently that I was like, I think this is the one. I've been writing down titles and stuff. And the title of the book is called Naked Goals. And I thought, one, it's kind of a disruptor, right? Like, naked goals. You know, like, I was thinking, well, at first I'm like, I don't know if I want to put that, you know, my pastor's going to get upset at me and think that, you know, I've got a goal to be naked or something, right? I might have to constantly be explaining it to the conservative people in our church. However, it also is a disruptor. Like, it stands out on the shelf, right? Naked goals. Well, what does that mean? Well, so to me, naked goals is I was looking at like life, and I was listening to Gary Keller speak one day along with several other leaders, and Gary Keller said something in Mega Camp that just, like, I heard differently, just landed different with me. I've heard him say it before, but it just hit home this time. And he said, you know what, people often ask him, you know, what is it that he does that makes him so successful? This guy is the most successful real estate agent, you know, in all of franchise history. What is it that he does that makes him so successful? And he says, you know, my day doesn't look any different than your day. Or at least it doesn't look any different than your day should look, right? He said the biggest difference between my success and your success is that when he sets a goal, he said that goal to him is immovable. It is non-negotiable. Like, if that goal is there, it's absolutely non-negotiable. And I thought about that because I really kind of resonated with the fact that my goals are negotiable. They really are. I make them negotiable all the time. And there's even a price that I pay that I'm willing to sell out, like, the best parts of my life, the parts that I call my life by design, these things that I say, well, nothing can replace these completely, you know, priceless moments in my life. And yet I sell them out all the time for $50 an hour, $100 an hour when I'm missing parts of my kid's life, you know, events, or whatever it is that your life by design is called. Because to me, when you're really tapping into that life by design, it's priceless. You can't put a label on how much those memories would mean to you when you're lying on your deathbed. And so Gary Keller's talking about his goals being non-negotiable. So I really started reflecting on this, and I thought, well, if my goals are negotiable, why don't we just start with what is working? What are some of the goals that I have in my life? Like, let's just start with some of the goals that I have that are non-negotiable. Like, what is it that I really truly take a stand for? And what are some of the things that other people take a stand for? Like, absolutely immovable, non-negotiable. And what hit me is, you know, like today, I said I got up early and we were at the airport plenty of time and we had time to kill and all that. But had we, let's say, woken up late, and I would have had that panic, like, have you ever woken up with that adrenaline rush where you wake up and it's like the minute that you're supposed to be walking out the door is the minute you wake up, like somehow your body just like kicked in and you're like, oh my God, I'm late. And you jump up and you're like instantly knowing that you have to be out the door, and you're looking at the clock and you're like, oh my God, we have 30 seconds to get ready. And if we leave in 30 seconds, like, we might make our plane. Like, that, you guys ever been there? Like, and there's consequences on it. Maybe it's a job interview. Maybe it's missing the plane. There's a few $100s for us to fly over here, right? There's consequences. So the adrenaline's going. Isn't it amazing how fast you get out the door when normally it take you 45 minutes, an hour to get ready, and yet you're out the door and you've compromised all these things. You're not eating breakfast. You don't need coffee all of a sudden because your adrenaline's going, right? In fact, you may even wear your outfit from yesterday. Your hair may just like go up in a ponytail, whatever it is. Like, you make all these compromises of negotiability. And what I really came to, though, is that there's one that we all agree It's an agreement. It's not a have to, it's an agreement that is non-negotiable. And that is that we leave the house with clothes on. We leave the house with clothes on.
I thought you were gonna say brush your teeth, but.
You know what? It's totally negotiable. I'll tell you what, it's totally negotiable.
That's true.
If you're late enough, you can't tell me for a second if you're,
10-4.
if you know your plane's leaving, if you're like, well, I can't have dirty. Dude, you're out the door, you're gone. You know what I mean? Like, but the one that will not be negotiated is that our society all agrees clothes is non-negotiable. Right? If I showed up here naked, I'm like, you guys, is a total story. So late today. I won't get into it, but I made it. You're like, bro, like, we would have rather you like caught the next flight, whatever. We would have caught you next time. Next time, put on clothes. You could have stopped at the airport, maybe grabbed the Tommy Bahama shirt, something. I'm like, no, we got off the plane, we were just running. Police gave us an escort. It was great. The one negotiable area that I thought, I'm like, wow, there's an agreement. Not only am I non-negotiable in that, I have a goal. It's absolutely an agreement. Because we're born naked, we get naked every day and all these things, and yet we're absolutely immovable in agreement that we all show up with clothes on. So much so that if even this crazy homeless person out here decided to take off his clothes and everything, it'd be amazing how fast some of these police would show up to take him away. You got these horrible homeless people walking around, they're on heroin, they're smoking meth, and they're still wearing clothes. They don't play by our rules, right? They're society outcasts, everything. They're like, screw you, I don't want any part of society, and yet they still agree that wearing clothes is non-negotiable. Even the homeless people are wearing clothes. Why? Because it's an agreement that we all have. It's non-negotiable. It's immovable that we cover up when we're around each other, right? And even though these homeless people could, with their dirty clothes and smelling clothes, they could go onto the beach next to our kids, start smoking meth, all that. And if we called the cops, we're like, dude, there's some homeless guy living in his tent with a shopping cart, smells like hell, and he's smoking meth. My kids can see him. They're asking questions.
But
How
he's naked.
How long would the cops take to get there? Half a day? Like, oh, what are you gonna do? These freaking junkies, man. We got other stuff to do. But if we called and said there's a naked man on the beach, they'd be there instantly. My kids are looking at this naked man on the beach. He's sunbathing naked and my kids are next to him. They'd all be there instantly taking that guy away. Because it's immovable. Heroin on the beach, kind of negotiable.
Except for McKenna.
Yeah, except for McKenna, right?
And
Middle Beach.
Yeah.
Middle Beach.
So, well, it's still an agreement that we only do it there.
Yeah, that's true. That's
Right?
true.
It's still an agreement that we have. And it's interesting to me because I look at this, I'm like, aren't human beings funny?
Yeah.
Aren't human beings funny? Like, what about it? About just some things that we all have agreements. Well, it's just an agreement that this is non-negotiable. And so then I started going into this because for me, what I have to do is if I want to make something that's not working work, I have to look for something that's already working and make it work differently, right? So like habits, we're going to talk about this, but how hard is it to break a habit? Do you think you can break a habit?
Yeah. It's challenging.
Yeah. Well, what I'm going to suggest as we go on today is that you actually don't break habits. What you do is you create new ones. You replace it.
I agree.
And a habit, I think, you were saying like, hey, these little wires, like these little things. I agree with you. There's these little channels, right, that fire together, and I kind of picture them as like riverbeds. So you think about one of these waterfalls, like on the road to Hana, and there's this riverbed and all this stuff, and years and years of flowing. And yet, if we went up to the top of it and we just like diverted it, right? We created a new waterway, and it went into like a water tank, and whatever, and we're just like using it. And so now this riverbed that used to flow with this natural rainwater is now drying up, right? And then eventually it would dry. And then if we still hiked up there, with that river, the riverbed would still be there. At any time if it rained, that water would just flow again, right? It would still be there. All the remnants, the rock and everything is just ingrained into the earth, even though we're diverting the water. I kind of think of that like energy and these channels, these connections. That habit is still there. Like I've done I recently did some things because my middle daughter, I have 4 kids, a 19-year-old daughter, 13-year-old daughter, 12-year-old son, and 10-year-old daughter. We'll talk about them a lot today. And my 13-year-old daughter is on the competition team for dance, and she's in ballet, and she's learning some really cool things, and she's learning to say, you guys remember The Karate Kid? You guys remember that movie? Sure. Okay, so there's this move in The Karate Kid where he's like falls on his back, and the guys, and they flip up. You guys remember this? Okay. So they're teaching that to my 13-year-old daughter as part of this dance move. Well, I grew up in martial arts. I used to compete. I was on a competition team. knew how to do all those things. It's been 20 years since I've done them. And she's learning, and I'm like, hey, let me teach you how to do it, because she's not really getting it down, and I'm helping her technique. And she's kind of giving me like the patronizing eye, like, Dad, okay. And I'm like, no, for real, like, I know how to do these. Like, listen to me, I know what I'm doing. And she's still doing it. And we're in the room, I was like, she's like, can you, and I think my wife was even teasing me, like, probably can't do it anymore. I was like, I still got one in me. It's gonna hurt, but the muscle memory is there. Like, I can, right now as I'm teaching her, I'm like, I can still feel how it's supposed to feel. That's what I'm able to tell. Like, it's been 25 years, whatever it's been, and I can feel how my back was supposed to position itself, how my shoulders felt when I did it, how my head would whip. And I'm trying to explain all this. I'm like, your head will, you're gonna whip it, you're gonna feel, you're gonna use your core. Like, I can feel every little bit of it, because that river channel was still there. All it took was some energy to go to that channel, and that riverbed, just like that rainwater and that drought, would just go right back to flowing. And those are kind of like habits, right? You get on it, you're like, oh, it's like riding a bike. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's a dried riverbed. That habit is, I get on there, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's still, well, it never went away. What happens, I just diverted it for a while. And bad habits are so easy to go back to, just like good habits are easy to keep. That's why addicts say they're an alcoholic their whole life. Now, I've been sober for 25 years, but I'm an alcoholic. Because they know that dried riverbed is right there, and all it would take is a little bit of water, go down it, and it would just flow. Right? They know. I had a friend who was a drinker, and we went out one time, and I didn't know, but we went out for a drink, and him and his brother and everybody, it was a business meeting, and they're like, hey, let's just have a beer, we'll talk some business. And so we both ordered a beer, and the one guy, he ordered a water. I go, do you not drink? He goes, oh, no, I drink. I just do it a little too well. And I'm like, oh, okay. And he's like, so I just, I choose not to. He's like, I just do it too good. He's like, I can't even have one, because once it gets going, like 2 sounds great. And once I have 2, doesn't 10 sound better, right? And that's a lot like these habits. So the 2 areas I told you guys, that Diana said, constantly as human beings, we should be looking to improve 2 areas of our lives as human beings. And the first one is our character. We should constantly be looking to be coached and to be growing, to be learning, to be productive and profitable around our character. And so what does character mean? That's like who we are as human beings. This is knowing oneself, right? Who we are to society, who we are to a family. This is our character, who we are with God, your spirituality. We'll get into that. I'm not trying to tell you, what to believe or what not to believe. I just happen to have tapped into some truths, and I'm happy to share those things if you want. But ultimately, our character is one area that we should never just give up, right? We're always improving that character, which means we also, if we want to grow something, because there's no such thing as the same, everything's either digressing or growing. We're either living or dying, right? And no such thing as the same. Then we need a coach. We need someone in that area of our life that's been through it and is helping us get to the next level. The second area that constantly needs to be improved is an area of productivity. And so productivity just means, what is a skill that you're building? What's something you're getting better at? Whether it's dance, whether it's, in this case right now, we're talking about productivity when it comes to money, right? That's an area that we can be productive in our business. If you were self-made and very wealthy and you didn't need money anymore, like God bless you, you might create some productivity around, running marathons or something like that. You would have an area that you're looking to constantly progress yourself and improve, right? That's where that fulfillment comes from, is our productivity. So that's what those things mean to me. And those were a lot of words for just a few words, right? And yet, when we change the way we look at things, did the things we look at start to change, right? It's a bold law. Here we go. We got a little laser pointer wherever it is. We're going to talk a lot about these, so you guys can help me find them as we go on. A couple other things about the day as we go on, and we got a couple hours together, is that there's a few different ways that we learn. We were talking about the way that neurons wire together, and we talked about that, like neurons that wire together or fire together, right? These habits. There's a couple different ways that you learn. If you guys have ever done the exercise, like you have kinesthetic, which is like hands-on, I have to do something. You got visual, you got auditory, right? There's these different ways that people learn. And so when you guys are writing notes, I see that you guys are writing things down. I love that. And what I would encourage you to do is to write down things that you want to implement, things that you want to learn. Okay, by the end of the day, what we're looking to do is to identify those things. As you write something down that you really want to know more about or implement into your life, why don't you put a little star next to it, right? Something that we can come back to. If it's an aha, something you want to talk about, put a little star next to it. Then if it's really important, you go back and go, that one's more important, put a little circle around the star. It's like deeming it even more important than the other ones. But what's interesting and cool about taking notes is that just by writing down your ahas, you're actually learning at 77% more. There's a 77% more likely chance now by having written it down that you're going to retain and actually implement that goal, just that aha. So much so that you could take these notes after having written all these things down and throw them in the trash. You could throw them away at the end of the day, and your brain is still 77% more likely to retain that information and implement it because you wrote it down. And I forget the actual stat. I got to look it up because I keep kind of paraphrasing it. But when you make a public declaration, when you raise your hand, you stand up and you go, this is what I learned. There's actually studies that show you're like 270% more likely now to implement that goal, to take action. So you think about the difference. If I wrote down like on this little piece of paper, I'm like, lose 10 pounds by Thanksgiving, right? And then I just like fold it up and I put it in my drawer. I'm already 77% more likely to achieve that because I've written it down and I've kind of stated it. However, if I was in this room or in front of my friends, I'm like, I'm going to lose 10 pounds by Thanksgiving. Now I'm 200, because your brain just functions different when you make this declaration, right? So when we ask for ahas, when we're going around saying, hey, what did you take away? There's two things that happen with that. And the first one I kind of say is selfish, but with any facilitator, you're teaching, and you go, hey, what'd you guys learn? What are your ahas? It's really great for the facilitator when we heard like, okay, you got something from this, like, hey, I learned this from you, you didn't waste your time, I got something from you, and that's cool. However, the second reason, which is the one I just told you, is really the reason you should always give your ahas. Is that the person that benefits most from giving ahas is not the facilitator. We think it is like, oh, let me throw them a bone, here's what I learned. It's really you, because now you go, this is what I learned. And your brain is very literal. Now your mind is not. Remember I was talking earlier, we have this mind and we have this brain. And it's a lot like we are a soul and we have a body. Right? We are a spiritual being having a physical experience. And so there's a distinction between the mind and the brain. And the brain works a lot like this computer. It's my operating system. And if I hit a key on that computer, it doesn't do anything besides what I tell it to do, right? It just does what it's told because it runs programs. Now the mind is very creative. The mind just thinks abstractly and things like that. And so the mind talks to us. And the mind says things like, that was so stupid, I can't believe you said that. And the brain, which is very literal and is running programs like, got it, lock that away. We're stupid. And we don't even know that we're writing our own programs to believe that we're ugly, to believe that we're stupid, that we're not charismatic, that we're not good public speakers, all those things. And we're the ones doing it, right? And as we get on, I'm going to talk about like the fears and emotions, but to jump ahead, it's like fear or faith, you choose. We're gonna get into that because what's interesting about that is that, I mean, here it is, right there. Fear or faith, you can't have both. Diana says fear or faith, you choose. When I talk to her, right? But she says you can't have both. And so we're only born with two fears as babies. You guys know what they are? Two fears that babies are born with. Wendy knows. Falling. Were you here for yesterday's when I talked about
And
this?
loud noises.
Yeah, falling and loud noises. It's the only thing babies are afraid of.